Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Nedarim, daf Samach Tes. We're going to begin on Samach Tes Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Boy Rabbi. So Rabbi asked the following question: Yesh she'ela b'hakem or ein she'ela b'hakem? So we're talking about a situation where a person was hearing a neder, and he had the ability to be made for it, but instead he upheld that neder. And the din is that now that's it. The neder is chal. That, let's say the wife made this neder and the husband does hakama, he establishes it. So now the question is, do we allow him to go to a chacham to have the hakama removed on that same day, and then allow him then afterwards to be able to do she'ela, and then to be able to do hafara rather. So if you hold that this person could go to a chacham, have the hakama removed, and then he could do hafara afterwards, do we say that you could have the hafara removed, and then maybe you can do hakama afterwards? So that's the same question. So you could actually go to a Shilas Chacham regarding the verification of a neder, and then therefore you could be made for it afterwards. However, but we don't allow you to go to a Chacham to remove the hafara. Once you deny this neder, that's it. So let's look at the Ran. So the Ran says, Boy Rabbi yesh ilal b'hakim. So im kiyam haneder. Again, we're talking about, let's say the husband verified the neder. The initial bo b'yom, and it has to be on that same day. He goes to a chacham al hahakim. He wants the hakam removed. Mimatzim mefer bo b'yom. Is he allowed to turn around and do hafar again? Alone. Avulomachar pshita deloy matzim mefer delogar mishtika. We know, let's say he didn't even do hafara, or he didn't do anything. He just listened to a shasuk. That's it. It's only b'yom shemoy. The only time he's able to do anything is dafka on the day that it was heard. If it was shasuk, the next day it's too late. So So this second question is building on the first. So near it's hard to even imagine that there's this notion of removing hafara. When it comes to establishing it, it's just like a neder. You can go to a chacham to remove a neder, so you can, which is something which is, I'm establishing that I have a neder, and hakama is on the neder, so you can remove the hakama. However, abu hafara lo, the hafara is really almost what the chacham does. He removes the neder. So you would almost think that you can't even go to a chacham ever to remove a hafara. I feel hachim in boilan. So there's actually a hekesh between the two of them, as the pasuk says, Isha yekimenu v'isha yefirenu. So we see this link that the husband has the ability to uphold the neder or to remove the neder. Question 13. Matzad yeshela b'hafer. So have the meaning kivan the hukish lahakim yishbo she'el lahakim. So that's what the Ram says. Okay. So we end up saying no, he can't. You can't do she'el on hafara, but you could do she'el on the hakama, which means you could do she'el on the hakama, and then afterwards you could do hafara. Okay. Let's see the Gemara's next question. Boy Rabbi. So here Rabbi asked the question. Before it was Rava. So he asked the following question. A person says, Kaim lichi. I want this to be a valid neder. And he says it a second time. I want this to be a valid neder. So he did hakama twice. V'nishal hakama rishayna. So we already said you could do she'ela. You could go to a chacham to remove hakama, but you only did the first one. So mahu, what's the din? No, since you did two hakamas and you removed one, so what's the din with the other one? So Tashma Diyama Rava im Nishal Rishayna. If a person, let's say, was Nishal on the first hakama, but not the second, Shniya Chololav. The second one still stands. and therefore there's still a hakama, which means that he can't do a hafara because you have a second hakama against it. Let's look at the Ran. The b'shvua shuliyachol shvua shulayichol v'hachinami ki mitchel hakama kamaisa shniachalov. The second hakama remains. Okay. So that was another question. So let's continue in the Gemara. So the Gemara asks the following. Boy Rabba. So Rabba asks another question. Person says, Kaim lichi, that I'm establishing this. I want this to be a valid neder. So you're doing hakama. And then umufar lichi. And in the same language, you also say I'm annulling it. So you said hakama and hafar, which obviously they contradict one another. And then you say, v'oteichol hakama. The hakama of establishing this neder should not take effect el inkin chol hafar, unless the hafara takes effect. So it's an what's the din? So let's look in the Ran. The Ran says, L'Rabba pshitale the hakama lichayil the mamarashach. According to Rabba, he holds that the hakama is not chayil in this case. Why? Why is it not chayil? Because if there's hafara, then hakama l'chayil, since the neder no longer exists. So once you did hafara, and it's a valid hafara, the neder's gone. So you can't do hakama. If the hafara is valid, then you can't do hakama, because there's nothing to do hakama on. The nehida will come on, granted, as we'll see on next stop. Misafgalon, there's a doubt of kaim lichi shah. If a person says, I only want to establish it for an hour, and I want to annul it for an hour, ichayel tervaihu o lo, whether or not that works, but hasam over there, shenasan kitzbah, you gave a set amount of time, hakama b'hafara, for the hakama and for the hafara. So it wasn't that you entirely removed the neder. You only mentioned it was going to be removed for a short amount of time as we continue to samach tasamad beis. Abel, as the Ran says, hacha shelo nasan kitzbah, you didn't give a set amount. Pshita the hafara chayil, that if the hafara works, hakama lo chayil, then the hakama will not work. Skipping 2 lines. Hilkach. Therefore, pshita l'rabba the hakama lo chayil. It has to be that the hakama doesn't work. Abel b'hafara hu d'masafgale. His entirety of his question is whether or not the hafara works. Miyamrin kivan the akdim, since he first said the yomer kayim lichi, first he said hakama, ubasar hachi yomer mufar lichi, and afterwards he said hafara. Since he chose to say it in that order, mashma the asne the teichel hafara basar kama. It's mashma that it helps that the hafara should work after the hakama. V'oteichel hafara acher el imkin hakama el imkin kadmo hakama. It has to be that it was done in that order. El the mamanavshach ashani lo seichel hakama el imkin chol hafara. So basically, the person is saying I only want one to take effect. If the other also takes effect, I want the hakama to take place first, and I want both, which is impossible. So hafara doesn't work, or maybe the order isn't really the focus point, even though he said hakama then hafara. Maybe it's just that you can't say two things at the same time. So perhaps that's the notion. Skipping down, samacha lishna dahakama v'leika del akevula delo teichel hakama elim kin chol hafar v'harihu kilu hisna al shtein sheyachul hakama batchila v'achar kach hafara. So that's again one thought process. I first wanted the hakama to work and then the hafara to work. So, and then that's one possibility. Odilma, skipping 2 lines, mishum di'iyar shalikra shnei shemos ke'echad. You can't say two things at the same time. And therefore, the fact that you said hakama first doesn't mean anything. Skipping to basically the first wide line, that kol moedim, everyone agrees. Ba'omer tachul zu, that I want this to be chal. The achar kach, and you use the language, and afterwards. You specifically say the words, the achar kach, techul zu, di'ir kol tofes lashon rishon. Then certainly in that situation, we go after the first lashon, because you're specifically saying this and then afterwards this. So it's clear that you want it in that order. They feel Rabbi Yosi Moida mishum di esher de lobasach dechayel trumas oila tachel trumas shlomim. You can't possibly say in that situation, even according to the Shita Rabbi Yossi, as we'll see in a second, they says, well, you can't say both at the same time. So the fact that you specified and said v'achakach, it must be, since it's impossible for it to be chal on trumas oila, even though you said trumas oila first, tachel trumas shlomim. So in that situation, even he will agree. Lo tachel zu el imkin cholsa zu. If you use the different language, this is not chal unless the other one is chal. Tevayu kardshon. Then both of them are kodesh. Mishum dehasam esher letemuras oil letemur shlomim. It's possible you can do an exchange. L'chol ka'achas tetirad behema zu. You can allow the animal to graze until it gets a blemish. So it is shaykh to be able to do both. Lo nechlu, they only argue el ba'omer trumas oil or trumas shlomim. So let's hold off. We're going to continue with the third line of the round in a second. Let's go with the Gemara. Tashma, the person said this exchange is an ola, and this exchange is for a shlomim. So harizu timuras ola de Rameir. So Rameir is of the opinion that we're tafel shlosh. We go after the first thing that's said, and therefore we say it's an oila. Rabbi Yossi Omer imul kach neschavin betchila. If let's say his intention was for the animal to be both, since it's impossible to say both at the same time, devar of kayomin, then it actually could be both. V'yafilu Rab Meir, even according to Rab Meir, who says you go after the first language, lo kamar doesn't say this. Doli amru lo techel zu el imkin chol zu. He's not talking about a situation like that. That's what he's talking about. Do not allow the first hakama el imkin chol hafara unless the hafara works. In that situation, the hafara will work. So even according to Rameir, who says you're tafel shlosh rishon, but since you're linking it to the second part, so therefore we don't just say tafel shlosh rishon. And therefore, because of that, he'll agree that in fact he'll in fact agree to this idea that the hafara is chal. Okay, so let's look at the Ran third line. Rameir savar medahavi l'memer trumas oila ushlamim. He could have said the word ushlamim. V'omer trumas oila trumas shlamim without the vav. It's like he said, he holds it's ki'u like you said this and then this, and therefore it only works on one, the first one. However, Rabbi Yossi savar the efsher toy. It's possible he made a mistake. Hilkach boit kinoi. So we examine im omer le'olo shlamim. If you wanted it for both nischavanti, then tirachi is tov timach v'yibachatzi dam v'oivachatzi damav. Then in fact that's what we do. We get a blemish, and then we'll divide up the proceeds, half for an ola, half for a shlomim. Rav Yossi holds the Retalia b'moitzi shnei shemus b'piv. The chi oimer umufalechi labasar kama koimer el bavas achas hilka chafara chayil. As he wanted both to take effect in no particular order, so hafara will take effect. Okay, so that is basically what is being said over here. That's the answer. Okay. Boy Rabbi, let's just see one more question. A person says Kaimu Mufralichi. A person says that the Hakama and the Afara linked as the same statements. Bavas Achas Mao Tashma Diyama Rabba Kol Dever Shenu B'Zeh Chazeh Afil Bavas Achas Einai. If it doesn't work one after the other, then it will not work together either. And this is actually brought down when it comes to marriage of a man, as Makadish, the Ran says, two sisters as one. Since you can't marry one after the other, then we don't say it works together. There's no doubt. There's no suffix kedushin. It's nothing. They're not married. So We have no doubt regarding the hakama or the hafara. So it's basically as though he did nothing. When you do everything, it's like you did nothing. Because since it doesn't work, b'vasachas, so therefore it's like what you said doesn't have any carry any weight. And because of that, the din simply is that it means nothing, so you could do hakama or hafara on that same day. Question 14. We'll stop there. So the answer is Kaim Mufar b'vasachas enu chal klal. It's nothing. If it doesn't work one after the other, then you can't do it at the same time either. Okay, let's look at question TB 15. Kim umufar l'chi b'vasachas. So it doesn't work. Im chol hakama o hafara b'mikroim elu. So I wrote kedini shtei achayois kim umufar l'chi b'vasachas enu chal b'hakama v'enu chal b'hafara, which seems pretty clean of a question, which has to be what the answer is. Kim mufar b'vasachas enu chal klal. Okay. How about if kayim l'chi shah umufar l'chi l'achar shah, which we didn't really see that yet, so well, let's just see what he says here. If it's only for a certain amount of time, hafara iboya do ifshita. So when it comes to whether you can be made for in that situation, that's actually going to be a question. And I wrote by kaim l'chi shah, this is a iboya do ifshita, an unsolved question. So by Nedarim, we go machmir and say it may be chal. Ad kan.